Recorded live at the center of the earth. This is Robots from Tomorrow.
Bonjour et bienvenue sur le robot de demain. Je m'appelle Grégoire, je suis heureux de vous avoir parmi nous. Or, as we say south of the 49th parallel, hello, and welcome to Robots from Tomorrow. My name is Greg, glad to have you with us. My guests today are three Canadian gentlemen. Luc Bossé, cartoonist of Gary, King of the Pickup Artists, and publisher of Pow Pow Press. Thom, cartoonist of such Pow Pow works as Seven, CASA RODEO, and the upcoming Botanical Drama. And returning guest, François Vigneault, a cartoonist whose Pow Pow works include the French language edition of his sci-fi classic Titan, but is here today in his capacity as Pow Pow's marketing manager. As you can probably guess, the running theme here is Pow Pow. More specifically, Editions Pow Pow, a Montreal-based publisher with the goal of spreading the work of Quebec cartoonists to bookshelves of French or English-speaking readers across the globe. Pow Pow came to my attention through Francois, but it kept my attention with books like the ones previously mentioned, but also Cathon's The Pineapples of Wrath, Sophie Bedard's Lonely Boys, and Éloïse Marseille's Naked, The Confessions of a Normal Woman. The goal of today's chat is to be nothing less than the best English language primer on Pow Pow, how it came to be, what it is, where it's going. I figure with these three guests, that is an attainable goal. So without further delay, let's get started. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Very good, and you?
I'm doing good. I'm going to get a chance to talk about comics that I know very little about, and I'm going to learn a whole bunch of stuff, no pressure. So I'm doing pretty good. First off, did I get anything wrong egregiously in that intro?
No, even the French bit was perfect too. So it's
Oh,
fine.
okay. I am leaving that in. That is definitely making the final cut. Okay. So, Luc, since this is all basically you're doing, let's start with you. It's 2009. You are a Montreal cartoonist looking to get his work out into the world. How did you end up on a podcast 15 years later running a worldwide publishing company?
By accident, I guess. It's naively, I was not planning all this to happen. Like you said, I was trying. It was the golden era of comics blog, and I was doing a blog and meeting people online and in person and trying to have my little strips out in the world and trying to at one point, because I'm a graphic designer because I study graphic design, I worked 10 years in the advertisement industry, and I was a bit tired to do the work of other people. So I wanted to do my own stuff. So to do a book was kind of a, a fantasy at one point, and just trying to make his own book. And what a better way to have his book published is doing it by yourself. So I was meeting some people around, and I've met Svian, who already had a couple of books published, and naively, without thinking about the consequences, as I said, let's do a publishing house. And my book and her book were the two first books, and once you start to realize what you put your foot into it, it's too late, and you're kind of the gears are moving on, and once you do one, it's kind of you're hooked to this drug to have the open a new book, a box of new books, a freshly printed book. Even 15 years later, it's still has the same rush to me as the first one. So I guess it's a good sign I'm doing what I'm doing. I like it. But if I knew beforehand what publishing was, I probably would not have jumped in. But now it's too late, so I'm in, so I'm continuing.
You're stuck. It's got its hooks in you. A question for the other two gentlemen. When you get a box of books, when you open it up, and you see, your book in print for the first time, is that still a rush?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's I mean, you work so hard and you work so long on your comic, on your whatever project it is. But for me, these comics, every time that it's always Luc that comes to my house and brings me the boxes, and
Oh,
it's
wow.
it's yeah, it's Christmas. It's the greatest feeling ever.
Wow. Francois?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like, I still get a rush from it. And one thing I've noticed is like in the last few years, because I do my own comics, but I'm also like, I do like so many weird little gigs, I'll like letter books, or like lately I've been doing the marketing for Pow Pow. And I've been like, wow, I'm like really lucky. I'm involved with so many books, like not even just my books, but I like touch so many other people's books. And it's like always exciting to see that book, like, so you see like Thom's book or another book from Pow Pow go out into the world. And like,
Hmm.
I have like my little, it's not my book, but I touched it a little bit and I feel good about that, and so that's been really fun for me lately. Like I've been kind of tripping out about that.
Yeah. You're like their godfather or like their uncle. Like you're not the father, but you're part of the family
I
and
like
stuff.
being
So
the
you're like,
godfather.
yeah.
That's nice.
You just need like a cat to sort of stroke
This is a lot. Like I think you've added a new life goal for me. That's where I want to end up.
Well, you're welcome. Okay, so Pow Pow is starting to roll. You've got a book out, you've got two books out, but you have started to include other cartoonists,
Yeah.
like Thom. What was it like turning your attention like from your stuff to other cartoonists and like getting them on board with you being a new publisher?
I guess I'm born under a good star because I've met the first, let's say the first dozen of books were people I got to know through. I participated to this workshop animated by one of cartoonists in Montreal called Jimmy Beaulieu, and I've met a lot of people. I've met Michel Mander, I've met Svian, I've met who else? A lot of people went through this workshop. So once you start, you publish a few books, and you people had projects around me. So I guess
Mhm.
there was not a lot of publisher at that time around. So I guess there
Mm.
was a need for that. So it wasn't. I won't say it was not that hard, but not it was not easy either. But still, I was lucky to have so many talented people around me, ready to do their projects. So once you do a few, it attracts attention to other, and you meet other people, and you go to those shows, conventions, and you're just talking about comics. And I was lucky enough that I didn't have to reach to people that made much, so
Mm.
it was more of organically happening. And so yeah, I feel really fortunate to have met so many great cartoonists so early in the process, actually.
Cool. All right, so let's switch to the other side of that equation. Thom, how did you find yourself at Pow Pow for that first book?
Actually, it was me that contacted Luc.
Okay.
I was still working on
Thumbs
my
up.
yeah. I was still working on that first comic on Seven, and I actually didn't have an ending. I didn't have like the whole book figured out yet, but
Mhm.
I still wanted to talk to him about it, and I was actually like kind of not fearful. I wasn't fearful, but I was like I didn't know if Seven would fit in Pow Pow because I didn't think it was. It's horrible to say. I didn't think it was good enough.
Mhm.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't know why I thought that. I thought that, but I really wanted to participate in this publishing house, and it was
Mhm.
actually I was talking at that time with another author, another Montreal-based author called Iris Boudreau, and she told me she's the one that told me go ahead, go ask Luc. what he thinks about it, and I think he would like it. So yeah, I asked him, and we had meetings. We had one meeting going to the festival of the city of Quebec,
Mhm.
and that's where we settled on. Oh yeah,
Yeah, but
Luc.
I knew you before that because you were
Wait.
still at school doing this degree in comics actually, and I
Ooh.
was for the final project I was invited to be a jury to the evaluating the everybody's students who were finishing the project, and you
Yes.
were really out of the league. You were above everything else. So you were already under my radar. So whatever project you were going to propose to me, I was already sold.
Uh,
Uh,
did you tell him that at the time, or was that something you were sort of keeping in the back of your mind? Like, I don't want him to get too big of a head, but
I don't remember.
I remember that yeah, you were the judge, and you were very encouraging, and it was a really big trip to have you like as a judge. But yeah, I wasn't thinking right then like what was going to be my next comic, what it was going to be. But yeah, I'm really glad I ended up with Papa.
yeah. Looking at the authors that Pow Pow, they're cartoonists that Pow Pow has cultivated, you get a lot of returning talents. Obviously, Thom has done, 3 books with you guys. As a cartoonist, having that type of a home, how does that affect how you work on like a day-to-day basis?
Well, for me, it is a comfort to be in that publishing house.
Hmm.
I don't think too much about um, if I'm going to, if the next story is going to fit. I just
Hmm.
want to, like, I hope that Luc likes it. That's pretty much it. And if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. But I don't really
Hmm.
think too much about it. Not that I take it for granted or something
Hmm.
like that. But
Oh,
yeah. Oh,
no, no,
sorry.
no, no, go ahead.
Yeah. So I I do keep in mind that okay, what is a story that really gets to me? That what is the story that I really want to tell? And that's pretty much my main focus. And I and if I have to brainstorm with Luc
Mhm.
about something, he's always open, and there's always room to talk about the story.
Looking at the sort of the swath of the Pow Pow books, you have autobiographical, I guess on one end, and then the other, you have a book about the son having a hangover and deciding, I am not going to come up today. You all can deal with whatever. For Pow Pow as an entity, can you sum up what your not criteria, but like if somebody says, what type of books does Pow Pow put out? Do you have a definition of that?
Uh, it's always been a running gag about what is your, in French, we say ligne éditoriale, what is the name? If it's François, ligne éditoriale, what would it be?
The house style or something like
Yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I don't have a direct answer because it's, I like every style. If I was doing always the same style, let's say sci-fi, whatever, I like to jump on every style because I want to surprise readers, and I'm really glad that people are reading Papa because it's Papa, whatever the style is, and they because of that they'll read a style, a genre that they're not used to read, and otherwise they will not have picked up this book. But because we publish it, they will take a Gilles Delporte book and go on the other side and take something else, which is like for as long as
Vile
the
and
train is,
miserable.
or my Valley Miserable, exactly a perfect example. So I like that to add this wide spectrum because I don't want to get bored. I like every style as a reader, and all the books that are going out through Pop Out are books I love a lot. So yeah, I guess the what is the line of style is pretty much the books I love to read. So I guess.
That is a great answer. I had the opportunity to talk with Josh O'Neill the end of last year, the publisher of Beehive Books.
Mhm.
He and before that he was Locust Moon, so he worked on that Little Nemo Dream Another Dream book. And he, if I'm remembering correctly, I asked him kind of a similar question, and he gave kind of a similar answer to you. It was like, well, these are all it's basically everything I like. Um, it was interesting, looking at that and then looking at this. It's almost like you're using Pow Pow you're using Pow Pow in a creative way. Like you may not be, drawing as a cartoonist, but you're still sort of using everyone else's work to kind of tell not your story, but like it's all sort of filtered through you. So through your curation, it's a creative act in sort of a wider sense. And I enjoy publishers that do that. Um, as you have spearheaded Pow Pow, I'm sure you've had to develop or use non-cartooning, non-creative skills like organizational skills or having to do like management stuff that, Thom does not have to worry about. Did you have trouble adjusting to those sort of responsibilities?
Uh, it's getting harder and harder.
Okay.
But I did hire people to help me with that. At
Hmm.
first, it was easy because it was small, not a lot of books out, not a lot of authors, and it grew and it grew. And at one point, I needed help, so I hired someone, and now we hired another person. Um, it's not the part that I like the most because I'm a graphic designer. I love putting my hands into the book, doing the layout and talking and working on the covers and stuff like that, and do the promotion, everything that's visual, thinking about the what the stand's gonna look like and at that festival and stuff like that.
Hmm.
What's your face when you show up? I like that, but of course, you have everything else. You have to do the management, like administration and stuff like that, and the non-fun part. But there's some people who like that stuff, so you have to
Thankfully.
get those people. Yeah, yeah, of course.
Sure.
But it's not my strength. I'll admit it's it's my no, it's a faiblesse. It's a
Weakness.
weakness. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, one way to mitigate that is, of course, to hire good people,
Yeah.
like our third guest here, Mr. Vigneault. How did you guys? Yes, thumbs up. I'm sure. Actually, did I talk? I don't. Did that when the last time we talked on the show? Were you?
I think it was when it came out in English, which was after it came out in French. So it was so I was already a little bit involved with Pow Pow, but that was more on the artistic side. I
Yeah.
think actually Thom and I had our book come out the same year.
Yeah.
Okay.
And but then yeah, so years later, uh basically I had always been like talking with Luc about different projects and like my own projects. It's really funny though because when you have Thom, that's a good example. Thom, he had his first book come out the same time my first book came out with Pow Pow, but he's done two more books and I've only done one. I'm behind, I'm like
Yeah.
and I think that that's maybe because I am often like trying to like find little gigs or projects and stuff on the side. And so when Luc started talking about how Pow Pow Press had existed, the English side of it had existed for a little while, but they were going to do a bigger push like into the United States and
Hmm.
Canada,
Hmm.
everything after the pandemic, because the pandemic just turned everything upside down. And so at first Luc mentioned it to me and he was like, oh, I'm thinking about like bringing somebody in, so let me know if you know anyone who would be good at it. I'm thinking about this person. I was like, oh yeah, that person's pretty good. That the other thing. And then I thought about it for a little while. I was like, oh, maybe I should do it. And so then I did.
It's a bonus to have somebody who can do the job on the marketing level, but also is a creator themselves, right? So there's less of something getting kind of lost in translation if you're marketing something that you don't have a native understanding of. And you obviously, that Venn diagram is basically looks like a circle. It's, there's a lot of overlap. Couple of different ways I want to go with this, but since we're talking marketing, let's talk about like outreach. So you've gone to festivals. You were at Angoulême earlier this year. You've got other stops on the Pow Pow tour. How do you decide what sort of presence you have there? How does that work?
Well, of course, all of this stuff is like in the end, it's Luc's decision because he's the publisher. But I'm lucky enough to work with him, especially on the English side of it. One thing I've noticed just talking to Luc about different things is that he has a very like go big or go home kind of attitude, which I like love. I'm like, wow, this is so refreshing. Like, I'll be like, oh, should we do this? And he's like, yeah, let's go, let's do it. And like, and I think he's got the attitude, which after 15 years you can kind of see that it is successful, that you really have to try hard, you have to be ready to make risks and things like that. So like at Angoulême in France, you've been doing that. Have you been doing that for 15 years, Luc, or how long?
No, we're distributed in France since 2016. So it's almost at the same time as the English branch started. Yeah.
And but like, and they always do a big booth at Angoulême, like on their own, and that's now every year. Same thing, like for instance with TCAF, we try and get bigger every year at the Toronto Comic Arts Festival, and that's been many years that we've been running. And so like we're one of those publishers who's always there. Like people can always count on us to be there. And then this year and next year we're starting to spread out. Like the last time I saw you, I think was at SPX, which was our first time at SPX in years. And we're going to do a SPX again. We're going to do VanCaf in Vancouver. We're going to do MoCA in just a couple weeks in New York, which I'm really excited to go back to. It's been years since I've been at that show. So I think we're right now on the Pow Pow Press side, and well, both sides, but on the part that I'm involved with is the English side. We're definitely have the mindset of like, let's grow. It's like time, like we're gonna grow the brand, we're gonna grow the publishing house, we're gonna get our books out there in places that they haven't really been before, and we're gonna publish more books. So there's a concept of like, you gotta be in it to win it, kind of, right?
Go big or go home, I guess is the one of the ways to say that. So if we're talking about outreach, you mentioned getting your books into people's hands. Let's talk about distribution. You start off as a French language publisher, distributing, I'm assuming, inside of Canada. I'm obviously not really familiar with Canadian distribution. What was it like in the early days of publishing and sort of literally getting your books out to shops? What was that learning curve like?
But at first it was it's hard to find a distributor when you only have 2 books in your collections. So the first emails I sent, nobody answered. And I was lucky enough that a board games distributor had this small tiny branch of comics from France they were importing, so they were ready to take us because I knew the guy was working there. Again, lucky. And they folded that branch like 2 years after we started, but by then we had 10-12 books. So from that time, now they were answering emails for the bigger distributors. So we found a home, which is the best one, I think. It's the first one is it's called Dismedia. It's a distributor in Montreal that distributes maybe 300 publishers, mostly from Quebec. So we're like home. And afterwards, we have a warehouse now in France with another distributor, and we have a distributor in Canada with Elite Disco, and we have a distributor now since last summer with Lunar in the States. So 4 distributors for such a small. We have more distributors than employees.
Wow. Okay, so when you made the transition to starting to do English language books, was the language barrier much of a barrier in terms of getting distribution for, your product in a completely different language?
It was not the language, it was the way of doing. The state of the book industry is really different outside Quebec in the rest of Canada that I was not aware the way it works. And there's a special, because Quebec is like a small minority in North America that speaks French, and the market is so small, but at the same time, because of that being surrounded by English speaking people, there's this desire to protect this culture. So a lot of people buy locals and stuff from Quebec, and there's even laws that protects the book industry. And the law that makes the big difference compared to the rest of provinces in Quebec is if you are a public library, school library, you have to buy your books from an independent booksellers. So that makes the booksellers viable. They can stay in business, and there's still new bookstores opening compared to the rest of Canada or the States. They're closing, but here in Quebec, there's still some, not every week, but from time to time, there's a new bookstores opening, and the market is more wealthy, but it's not like it's millions, but it's still the people manage to and because I find that our success is mostly due to bookstores and booksellers. They're the one who are putting our books in the hands of people trying to sell online through big stores like Amazon. It's unfair competition. It's super hard to get through. So having those independent bookstores was a big part of our success, early success. So now the challenge is to make this happen with a different perspective, and it's so different that to go back to your initial question is the barrier was understanding the market, which is really different, and the way it works. And I was not, again, I was still naive, even 7 years after starting the French start. If I knew, I will not have done it. But again, because translating books in English was like an idea from day to the next day. I was with Vian in Quebec and having a conversation with someone, and an author from France asking us, telling us we should translate our book in French to French for France. And I was a bit pissed of being told that. I said, there's no way I'm going to translate our books French to French. If we translate our books, it's going to be to English. And I turned around to one of our authors, and I said, do you want to do some English books? He said, yeah. The next day, I think we were putting up a Kickstarter to finance this, but it was not taught truths. It's a bit stupid to do it, but yeah, there we are.
Yeah, you've paired with Lunar Distributions here in the States last year, I guess. How has that been?
But I mean, honestly, it's been really great. Lunar has been a really good partner to us. Like there's no magic bullet, right? Like there's nothing that's going to say like, oh, cool, like all of your financial worries are done, and like your book is distributed in every store in all of the world or anything like that. And so it's a slow road. You sell some books, you sell some more books and things like that. Luc always says that you do the whole business is all one book at a time, right? Like, and what he said with independent businesses, that goes just as much for in the United States. Like, we're selling these books, Lunar is distributing them. They've got a great client list of great shops all around the US, and the local comic shop is such an important element to like the comics culture and everything like that. So I look upon it as such a win whenever we have Thom's new book, Botanica Drama, is going to come out in April, and it's going to be in 100 shops all around the United States. It's going to be available to people who might never have thought, oh, I'm going to read like a silent fable, by, like about the sun and magical creatures and things like that. They're going to be exposed to something. They're going to see it on the new rack or the shelf and things like that. And Lunar, right from the start, they had a lot of energy for us. We met with the top people there, and they just were excited. They were like, we like what you do. We like the look of these books. Let's do it. And they've given us a lot of support. They'll do things like that I really appreciate. You know, they'll do things like I did an interview with Thom recently, and that's going to go out to like all the stores, and you know, like maybe that'll help see a comic book shop that's never heard of me, have never heard of Pow Pow, never heard of Thom, but they're going to see this interview in their inbox, and they're going to be like, oh, this sounds like an interesting book. Let me take a chance on it. And that's what we're always just hoping, is that people are going to take a chance on stuff, and you slowly build. Like for us, we're in it like it's a long-term thing, you know, like we want to see what's going to happen with time.
Yeah, the lunar thing I thought was interesting. Lunar pretty much came into existence as DC's sort of alternative during the crazy times of the pandemic. But I was looking through their catalog the other day, and you have like Ablaze, and you guys, and Image, and DC, and all of that stuff. So there is a real benefit for you for some of these shops that maybe don't stray too far outside of the norm, to be like, well, my DC people are telling me about this book. That carries some weight, and then they look at it and they see it, and they look at Botanica Drama, and they're like, this is hilarious and this is great, I need to order it. It helps sort of bring the partner up the folks. So when I heard you guys had gotten the lunar distribution thing, I was like, ooh, that's interesting, I'd like to talk to them about that. And here we are. Okay, so let's actually do a little bit of marketing ourselves. Thom, you sort of mentioned it a little bit. Why don't you talk a little bit about Botanica Drama and what it is?
Well, it's a story. It's like François said, it's a bit of a fable. It's about the son who is his own entity, who one night after partying very hard, has a bit too much to drink, and does not want to come up the next day, and the whole world is I don't know how to say it, is just pushed into darkness.
Yeah.
And it's just an eternal night.
Mm-hmm.
And people are trying to still live their lives, live through this catastrophe. And through this, you have the two main characters. You have Philomene, a little flower, and her best friend, Death, who who oversee everything that happens and live through this catastrophe with all the other folks in the village where the action takes place. And yeah, it's a comedy, but it's still a bit more than my first two. There's a bit more of a dramatic tone to it, but it's still a cartoon.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Thank you.
I mean, one of my favorite images is it on like the first page? It's obviously really, really early in the book. It's the hungover sun. Like it sort of rises up, and then he's got the stubble and like the coffee mug or something. This is like, it's so great. So yeah, so your work, or at least in this book, is essentially wordless, right? Like it's without basically traditional dialect balloons. And I guess I'd like to sort of use that to lead into, this idea of translating. What sort of translation or maybe localization can go into a book where there isn't a real language barrier? Is it like a no-brainer? Be like, oh, well, that one's easy. Let's just spend our time working on these others. Or are there still considerations for putting out this book for a English-speaking audience versus a French-speaking audience? Is there a question in there? I think there is.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Okay.
I'll just mention that the one thing that's interesting about Thom's books in particular, they're the only books that we do where we do one edition for both books, and so it comes out like, which is amazing. But I'm sure that Thom has to think about it as he's doing the books, like what kind of sound effects that you're gonna pick and everything.
It's actually something that we talked about the first for my first comic with Luc 7. It's something that we talked about because the first comic it's a wordless comic, but there's still words like on billboards, on newspapers, and at first it was all French. It was all French words, and they were like not very like important. They weren't important words, but it's just me having a bit of fun with them. But Luc told me that we should. We talked about this, and we actually agreed that it should be bilingual, so that we could,
Mm.
you know, push it more on an English speaking audience and an international audience too. So all the words that are in my three books are actually very common words that you can see, you can go back to in French or in English. Um, I even had like a Japanese reader that still really could understand what was happening.
Mm.
So that was like like for me it was okay. I think I did the job well, and it's still a bit of a challenge, but a good challenge. I'm glad to do it that way, to do it the more accessible way possible.
Hmm.
There was other stuff to take into consideration. First, the title. The title has to work both in both language.
Yeah,
And seven, it's written in Roman letters with numbers, so it works. But there's also technical stuff like on the French spine, the titles go from bottom to top, and then English
Yes.
spine it goes down. So what
yeah,
what should we do with that? So Thom put every letters on top of each other on the horizontal,
Hmm.
so it works on both sides. We didn't pick a side actually. It's written on top of each other, so it like in between.
yeah.
Um,
Another big challenge was also the sounds effects,
mhm, mhm.
the onomatopoeia. I don't know how to say it in English.
Onomatopoeias. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. 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 Yeah.
And it's actually a bit of a mixture of French and English sounds.
Mhm. Hmm.
And I hope it works well, but it's like the most fun I have with words in these comics. It's just doing all these sounds that are just it doesn't matter which language it comes from. If it sounds funny, if you can hear it,
Mhm.
whether it's in English or in French, I will use it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, because it's the sound, ironically enough, for a silent,
yeah,
expression of a
yeah,
sound. If it sounds correctly in the person's head as they're reading it, which is interesting because then your lettering plays into that. Like how it's lettered can give it a bit of a personality that we as humans translate into maybe a bit of a sound or a voice in our heads.
yeah.
Okay, so I feel like that's one end of the translation spectrum. And thankfully, since Francois is here, he can talk about translating Titan from English to French. And there is dialogue in that, so it's probably a little more of a challenge. I know you probably talked about it the last time you were on the show, but can you give us a little refresher on what that process was like?
Yeah, there's one dedicated listener who's like, I remember everything that he
Yeah,
said 6 years ago. I can't believe he's wasting my time talking about this again.
yeah.
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough when Luc approached me about doing the book. I wrote it in English, and it was he had a translator of mine, which was a writer, a comics writer here named Alexandre Fontaine-Rousseau. And I think there was a lot of advantages to that. Like Alexandre is himself like a comic book writer, so and he's a real like culture vulture, like he's absorbed like everything, like every bit of science fiction, fantasy, comedy, and like everything. And so he gets a lot. And so it was really interesting, and I thought he did a fantastic job of bringing the book to life in French. And then I am really lucky in that, like, I didn't feel confident to translate the book into French myself, and I don't even know if I would feel confident to do it now, even years later. But I can read what he wrote, so it wasn't like it was
Hmm.
being translated into like Persian or Russian, something that I just have no idea.
Yeah.
I could read what he was saying, and I could give him like feedback and say, oh, I think there's this little thing missing here, or I like this, or we had like a lot of like back and forth in the process.
Mhm.
Um, And there were some interesting like challenges, you know, like in my book Titan, there's like it's set in the future and there's kind of like futuristic slang. And that was an interesting thing to try and like translate that over into the French language, which has a different set of idioms and everything like that. Also the Quebec, like as Luc mentioned, the Quebec French is a little bit different than the quote unquote international French or the Parisian French. And so there's some always these like little nuances that come in with like what kind of, you know, like idiom, verbiage, etc., that you're going to use. But overall, I was really satisfied with the project at the end. And we're Pow Pow's lucky we work with quite a few really good translators. Alexander's quite a few of the books. Helga Dasher and Robin Lang do quite a few of our books. And then once in a while, like our authors will translate their own books. Like Luc, your book, you guys did it yourselves, right?
Yeah. Alexandre, the writer, another Alexandre, they rewrote everything himself. So I think there's, at the beginning, one book out of two was the author himself was doing it in English. Like Michel Mann did it himself, Samuel Quentin did it himself. So yeah, so it's interesting to have the translator. It's more of a adaptation than a translation because the writer is rewriting everything. So there's some nuance sometimes when they rewrite everything.
And then on a technical side, going back to Titan for the translation, Francois, did you re-letter it in this new stuff?
Yeah, I did it. Yeah, I did all the re-lettering myself, and yeah, or actually the first lettering because I always forget. Like it came out in like little issues in English first, but the first book of it was with Pow Pow was in French, which I felt really like cool and privileged that my book came out in French first, and then so I re-lettered it into French for that, and then I re-lettered it later on back into for Oni, yeah, a couple of years later.
Yeah, I would assume that for Pow Pow that the original cartoonists are probably pretty involved in the relettering of their work, which is probably an interesting like way to revisit a work. All right, so that brings us to now. We have at least one new book coming out in a couple of weeks, Botanica Drama. What else does Pow Pow have on the books for 2024, maybe 2025? What does the future look like for Pow Pow?
François?
Yeah, I'll take it. I spent all day thinking about it, so I'll take it. Yeah, well, we've got two brand new books coming out in spring. So we've got Botanica Drama, and that comes out on April 10th, and that's going to be in bookstores and comic shops everywhere. So keep a lookout for that. And then the month after that, we have another great book, The Jellyfish by named Boom, who I think you already know. And she's actually pretty well known in the American market because she's one of these people who self-translated her. She did like a web series and she self-translated it to like reach the American audience and the Canadian audience. And so we're really pumped. Her book already has won a bunch of awards and has been nominated for more. Same with Thom. Thom just had a great nomination for Book of the Year for Botanica Drama too. So we're very pleased about that. So those are our two big books for the spring. And then I think we're not going to do any brand new books for the rest of 2024 because we want to like work on our ground game to get even. We're satisfied where we are now, but like I said, you know, we're always trying to kind of go big or go home. So we're like thinking about like how can we get some really great books out there, and we have some really cool books that are lined up. One is The Mongoose by Joana Mossi, which came out in French already, and she's a Portuguese creator who met Luc at a portfolio review at TCAF, and then it was a really good match, and Luc ended up publishing her book directly afterwards. So that one's gonna be called The Mongoose. And then Luc, can we announce the other one yet, or
yeah,
we've signed the contract for it? Okay.
Yes.
So we have another book called Tsunami that's going to be coming out in the next spring, which is really cool. Ned, what's his last name?
Wenlock.
Yeah. And he is a really cool, very unique voice from New Zealand who we're going to be publishing in both French this fall and in English in the spring. So I think overall, Pow Pow is going to be trying to get more distribution into more of these independent local shops, bookstores, comic book stores throughout the United States, Canada, and of course here in Quebec too, because we're so dedicated to the local shops, and we think that that's our path to, quote unquote success or getting our authors out there.
Mhm.
We are also really into not only these international authors, but just bringing the work of, there's so many cool people in this scene here in Montreal and in Quebec overall. As Luc was saying, you meet so many people, and there's so many talented people here, and it's just like I find it's part of my mission is like, I'm like, there's just so much hot shit going on in this place that
Yeah.
I really want to get it out there. And so I just think that there's so much here that people might be introduced to. So those are our main goals. We've got some really great books coming out. We're gonna be pushing them big in 2025. And then for the rest of 2024 too, we have also all of our back catalog that's coming out, and then all the
Mhm.
shows we're going to be doing and everything like that.
Yeah, the back catalog thing is interesting because it's back catalog for you guys, but it's new as you're gaining new territories and new audiences and things. Then it's like you have 2 new books coming out, but then for some people, it's like you have 40 books that are like all new. So where are the best places for people to be able to follow the Pow Pow train?
So it was very hard. We had some ups and downs trying to get a second Instagram story, but we finally did it. And we have an English Instagram called, it's pow.pow.comics. And you can find us there and at powpowpress.com. And then that's all on the English side where you can find us. And then on the French side,
Instagram, of course, and we're working on a new website that's going to come out in about a month, which is going to combine English and French, because right now there's 2 websites and it makes no sense to have everything separated. So everything is going to be on the main site, and it's going to be more stuff on there. So this is a good place to start to follow everything, because of course we're on Facebook, Instagram, and stuff like that. Not TikTok yet. Should we get on TikTok? I don't know.
Yeah. Thumbs down. Okay, well, was there anything Pow Pow related that I did not prompt you guys to talk about that you want to talk about? Okay, I'm seeing heads shake.
You did great. I know you managed 3 people. You were a good host.
Oh, well, that's staying in as well. Okay. Well, gentlemen, this has been great. I'm going to let you get back to the rest of your afternoons, but thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us, and good luck. And hopefully, you're coming to SPX, so we'll be able to check in and see how 2024 has gone for you guys in about 6 months or something. But thanks again, and yeah.
Thanks to you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg.